mindful of time here, so I'm going to try to wrap up in 5 minutes. But first, I want to thank Shank actually approached me last week, so I want to thank him for and everybody in AK side for organizing this. My father was actually a member of this fraternity back when he was in school in the Seattle area. I'm also very happy to be back here because I started my teaching career at UVA with this building, so it feels good to be kind of home in a certain way. And I actually lived on the range, so I had the best commute possible. And I see so many of my past and even current students here. So Adam and I finished Darden in 2005, our MBAs. And when we were in the MBA program, Darden was my business school. But once I switched over to the PhD program, Darden became my business. So you can imagine though I'm getting a PhD, having more or less an MBA mindset as I go through the process. And that makes me a little unique. And the class that I teach tends to be a little unique even among UVA's offerings. So what I'll take my time to talk about is how a professor, and a business professor, goes about thinking really in a business way, really still in a very strategic way, similar to the panelists, about how I can leverage social media. And one of the things that I think makes me different from a lot of professors is that I don't lament the fact that students, just like you, see their professors as customer service agents. Right? I can't tell you the number of articles I've read in the Chronicle of Higher Education, New York Magazine, where all these old professors are complaining that their students really expect something from them, other than standing on a podium and reading lecture notes that may be years and years old. Now, the Darden School, UVA, you guys are spoiled because just in general, this university has distinguished itself by having great teachers, not just great researchers. I've been to great research universities before here, and trust me, the teaching you're getting here is excellent and your professors care. But while I was at the Darden School, we have an entrepreneurship center, the Batten Center. So there's a new Batten School now, but Darden has the old Batten School, and it's the entrepreneurship center. And we bring in Batten Fellows, and a gentleman named Jim Gilmore was there during our second year, and he did something called the Experience Economy. And I don't know if you've read this book or heard about this book, but you should check it out. And he talks about businesses being able to differentiate based on customer experience. So if I'm a business professor, and I'm looking at the university from a management perspective, and you're my customers, and I'm reading books like The Experience Economy, then one of the things that I'm thinking of is, how can I get a competitive advantage in the market of being a professor? By providing you a different experience than I might have had, and a different experience than you're getting in other classrooms. So social media is something that I've been experimenting with over the last couple of years, specifically with the idea that students as customers are becoming more discerning and more expecting as far as what the demands are on the pedagogical dimensions from their professors. It's not just, I have a PhD, and that's why you should listen. There's a lot of PhDs out there, and I needed to have, and as I get ready to think about moving out to the market, I still had to think about differentiating myself. So I'll just talk about 3 things I did in my classroom last semester. Sean was in that class. See Evan here, he was in that class too. Because the students really loved it. The 3 technologies I used were Ustream. Everybody, how many people in here know about Ustream? Okay. So Ustream is, well, it's free broadcasting. Right? And I did my office hours on Ustream. Right? So I would broadcast from my room at my house. And it's from like 7 to 8 o'clock, right, on Sunday evening, when you could never get a student to meet you anywhere. And I would broadcast. I'd say, you've got a business project, here's my office hours, tune into my broadcast station, Professor 2.0. Tune into my broadcast station, right, and you can see me and then chat in your questions, right? But at the end of that hour, what would I have? I would have an hour of user-generated content. I mean, it was me like basically giving business plan consulting advice, right? Other people get the opportunity to see the conversations that I'm having with the other teams. And one of the things you learn as a professor is when you set up your office hours, one student comes in for 15 minutes and asks you 3 questions. The next student comes in and asks you the exact same 3 questions. And the next student comes in and asks you the exact same 3 questions. Right? So it was about making sure that people can see and were a part of a larger conversation about management or marketing strategy or branding or how do you figure out demand, whatever the conversation of the day was or the week was. Everybody could be a part of that. But there would be an archive of it. To this day, you could go to my Ustream channel and those conversations are sitting there. And then I would just email out the transcript of the chats so people could always match us up. So what if you can't make it on Sunday? That's okay. You can tune in at a later point. Those conversations are there. And then I use that data at the end of the semester to put together the next course, right? Because I can now go back and have an archive to figure out what students actually thought were interested, what questions that students asked versus what questions that I think students should ask. So Ustream ended up being kind of a cool thing, and students kind of liked that. And it was kind of personal, right? I mean, I'm at home in a baseball cap, tuned in on, on my laptop, you know what I mean? And so it was just a different way to experience me as a professor, okay? Another thing I did was Twitter. We've talked about Twitter all the time. So when the final presentations were made, right, I had everybody up with a Twitter account, tweeting in real time, right? Kind of what you were probably talking about, Alexander, going to a conference, and tweeting in real time your reactions to things that are happening. Oh, that slide's too busy. Oh, the music's too loud. That didn't make any sense. I really like this. Like, people were tweeting in real time. Okay, and then when it was over, you could go and find your hashtag on Twitter and see all the comments that people had to make about your group. But one of the things that was cool about that is, see, at UVA, all the students are really smart and really vocal. Not necessarily the best listeners. And what the Twitter moment did when we debriefed was it actually tuned people in and got them engaged and even invested in the presentations in a way they wouldn't have been before. It made people more active listeners, right? And even co-participants in the presentation, right? People took stock in the presentation that was made. They had skin in the game. So it was a very different kind of, like professors, we always talk about being in the bubble. Like all your professors, when they come in, they're like, you got to be in the bubble. Everybody's there, all tuned in. It was a different way that the bubble was made and reinforced. Okay? So Twitter, we always talk about sending stuff out, right? But it's like Twitter's also great from a listening exercise too. And the last thing that I'll talk about here was the YouTube videos. So the format I use for the presentations, 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide. It's a great new style that's coming out, mostly from architecture. And just like I'm doing with this flip camera, by the end of the night I had that stuff uploaded. And so students could almost immediately go, and not only do they have all the Twitter stuff and the record of people's real-time reactions, but they could also look at themselves. And it was amazing because so many of my students are also fourth years. How many folks had never actually seen themselves recorded? Right? So once again, it just added for a larger, fuller experience. And of course that creates a record, right? More user-generated content. And so I know I've written recommendations for folks for different programs. And rather than me just saying, I really like this student, I think they'll be great for your program because I remember this great moment for them, I can literally say, oh, and here's the link to the video that I'm talking about. Right? And now that I run a high school program, a high school business program at Darden, and I'm building the whole thing around social media, and one of the things that I'm thinking, as far as having things for them strategically, is they walk out of my program and they apply to college. So how can, with very similar things that I did with my class last semester, how can I give them this stuff that they can then leverage at a later point? Right? This user-generated content that they can leverage. So that's the way I had used it in class last time. I apologize to my current students because I'm not using any of that stuff this particular time. It's like every semester I move to a worse situation. So now I'm in the chemistry building, so yeah. And so some of this actually, but that's apropos, like some of the reason why I also went to social media, I think last semester we were in like New Cabell, right? Not palatial, okay? And so some of what I had to, but that gives me a challenge. Like I was trained in places like this, right? In classrooms like this. This is how I learned how to teach, right? And so when I end up in New Cabell, I have to figure out ways to incorporate instructional technology in situations where I can't even use a PowerPoint presentation, right? So it helps me kind of get beyond the boundaries of the location. The last thing I'll say before I turn it over here is One of the things that's interesting is that people have become aware of the experimenting that I do. And like Alexandra, now it's kind of become the expertise of running social media campaigns, whether it be for event planning, whether it be how I incorporate it into teaching, is starting to become kind of a cottage industry for me, right? And many times people are asking me to come and talk about my research, but a lot of times now, different business schools are asking me to come and talk about how I incorporate social media into my classes, right? And so schools are now struggling to try to incorporate social media in their practices and even courses on it. So I think that the panel that we've had tonight is really significant in that. I think that the Commerce School and AK Psi are providing a service for this community that might just be normal 2 years from now, but it's certainly cutting edge right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Thank you, our panelists. We have